So I'm in London, and coincidentally, I didn't know there was going to be a general election. Nobody did. That's the great thing about the UK is that a snap general election can be pulled together really fast. But it's been a landslide win for the Liberal Party, known as the Labour Party, the party of the unions, the party of the people. You could call it socialism, but it's not a word we really use here. The UK is a social democracy where healthcare is free, where there is welfare if you can't work, where there is a support network for people who are struggling. And really, I grew up with that. It grew out of the Second World War, and it's really a kind of fundamental part of British culture. And so it's kind of thrilling because the Conservatives, who've been in power for 14 years, have really had to leave the political landscape with their tails between their legs because they have simply not just screwed up the last 14 years of British politics and economics and the kind of social system, but they have lied and they have cheated and they have been corrupt and they have. I mean, just as a couple of examples, a PPE scandal, for example. So when COVID came, they gave these kind of PPE contracts to their wealthy friends. Billions and billions of pounds. The same with the test and trace scheme, which cost 30 billion. I mean, nothing in England costs 30 billion. The Olympics only cost 12 billion, for example, back in 2012. So, that was a scheme, again, designed to enrich their wealthy friends, did nothing for the people, did nothing to protect people from coronavirus, which incidentally I have at the moment. Just am recovering and have been in quarantine for 10 days. But aside from that, we have to kind of look at the bigger picture and ask why the British people rejected the Conservative government with such a huge landslide. The new Prime Minister will be Keir Starmer. By the time you see this, he'll probably already have gone to meet the King at the palace and ask permission to become the Prime Minister, and the King has to give his blessing, and then he will be addressing the people as the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And this process, it might seem weird or antiquated, having a monarchy and everything else, but trust me, it works. And in fact, in those few minutes between Rishi Sunak, the outgoing Prime Minister, handing in his notice, going to meet the king, saying, "Okay, I'm resigning," and the new prime minister asking permission to take on that role, the king actually has the power for those brief minutes, and in some cases, it's just a matter of seconds. So there's protocols, there's systems, but trust me, the U.S. as I see it now, as a resident of the U.S., the way that Republicans are treating Donald Trump, they're treating him like a king. They want him to be the king. He wants to be the king of the United States. And that is the issue here, isn't it? Because, I'm often criticized. People like to get into arguments with me about, the monarchy versus the republic. And yet, the irony is that the US is now seems to be going the way of a monarchy, and through choice. And all these Trump supporters, when interviewed at rallies, how do you feel about Donald Trump being a dictator? And they're like, well, I suppose I'd rather he was a dictator than have corrupt Joe Biden. And it's like, whoa, like you have got your head on backwards. So it's important that we look to the rest of the world to see how other countries handle their democracies. But we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. That is a democracy. The US is a democracy and must maintain its democracy. Otherwise, it will go the way of Russia or North Korea, these countries where these leaders install themselves permanently. And, Vladimir Putin's been there for what, like 23 years now? And shows no sign of leaving. He just signed himself in for another 7 years. And we have to think about, what we really want for the United States. And the fact that the media has decided to jump on this anti-Joe Biden bandwagon because he had one bad 90-minute debate on CNN, a channel that nobody really watched. The debate was not widely viewed, just clips of the debate that people have been circulating. Donald Trump lied for 90 minutes, didn't tell a single truth in that entire debate, and yet all anybody wants to talk about is how Joe Biden kind of coughed and spluttered and wasn't able to finish sentences. These two people could not be more different. And the fact that people would think that to choose a dictator over a Democrat and a delegator just because of one bad debate makes no sense to me. Well, it does. I recognize that the media plays a huge part in this. And the New York Times has come out, batting for Donald Trump and pushing for Joe Biden to step down. Joe Biden is a brilliant candidate. And, while I'm in London now for my sister's wedding, I was talking to an American relative of her fiance who is like, well, I'm a conservative, been a conservative my whole life. And I would vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump because I care for the republic. I care for democracy. I care for the American system as we have it now. And I said to him, what is it about Joe Biden that makes you want to vote for him? And he's like, well, because he's a moderate, he's not a radical, and he looks like me. Biden is an old white guy, and a lot of old white guys, conservatives and Democrats, are going to vote for him. And I still believe that despite all of the media outrage and the chants of Gavin Newsom's name or Kamala Harris taking over, it's just insane. Joe Biden is an excellent candidate. He's not excellent at TV debates, which are a very unnatural, uninviting environment for somebody like him. Donald Trump thrives in the TV studio. That's his natural home because he is a TV personality. That's what he does for a living. And so we have to be absolutely clear the difference between one and the other. One is a dictator, the other is a delegator. And Donald Trump posted only yesterday a clip from a rally where he basically said, the UK can choose their general election. I want to be able to do that here. They can pick their day, they can pick their time. I want to be able to do that. Ignoring all of the precedent and all of the protocols and all of the history, just deciding that as a dictator, he should be able to set when the election happens. He's telling you who he is. And then there's this clip going around of him on the golf course with Barron in the golf cart next to him, looking utterly embarrassed and depressed, where Trump is just looking like a Jabba the Hutt and just is, handing cash over, I guess, to somebody he had a bet with. And he basically is like, Biden's finished and, Kamala's terrible. And he treats this like a reality TV show. He doesn't really know what is at stake. He doesn't care for democracy. He doesn't care for the republic or for the system. He doesn't care for the Constitution. He is somebody who is going to create so much havoc. And obviously, as we know now, with the Supreme Court on his side, not just giving him immunity, but I have no doubt that if he loses the election, he will contest the election, he will take it to the Supreme Court, and they will reverse the decision. So this is a problem now, isn't it? How do we deal with the constitutional aspect, the legal aspect of Donald Trump as a dictator? He and his friends at the Heritage Foundation and, the people behind the scenes, the people we don't often really talk about, the Federalist Society, putting all of the measures in place to guarantee Donald Trump a win, even if he loses. That is how high the stakes are. Read Project 2025. Ingest it, understand what they are offering because they're not hiding it. It is out there for everybody to see. And if you care about women's rights, if you care about the rights of asylum seekers, if you care about LGBTQ plus community, if you care about people of color, if you care about the working poor and the middle classes, the only choice in this election is Joe Biden and the Democrats, because Donald Trump has no interest in we the people. His interest is in big business, the super wealthy. I mean, the guy just did a deal with Saudi Arabia, for goodness sake. The country where the 9/11 hijackers came from. The country who murdered Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist. This is who Donald Trump enjoys the company of. And so the point that I want to make here is that if the UK can reject 14 years of conservative rule in a landslide that is so great, it has wiped out even Liz Truss, this terrible far-right character who was the prime minister for 48 days here in the UK and had to resign because of her ridiculous budget. She's been thrown out. She's not a member of parliament anymore. If the UK can recognize how dangerous conservatism, which has moved into the far right fringe space, is, then so can Americans. And I really believe that American people are not stupid. They will rather choose Joe Biden. I mean, I've seen people say, I'd choose Joe Biden even if he has to be propped up in a chair over the alternative. And what is the choice? The choice is a far-right Christian nationalist dictator who cares nothing for the Constitution and cares nothing for America and chooses to curry favor with our foes rather than our friends. He has no relationship with Europe. He wants to come out of NATO and chooses Kim Jong, chooses China, and chooses Russia as his allies. I personally don't believe that the US will go for that. Somebody who is so hateful, so vile. If you were to see the posting that he made on the 4th of July, it was so offensive. And I believe that the American people are better than that. The only worrying thing I would say about the UK right now is the person who also got elected to Parliament was Nigel Farage, who is a kind of neo-Nazi, far-right British nationalist who hates Europe, was responsible for Brexit, for removing the UK from the European Union, and now is probably going to join up with the Conservatives in Parliament, and over the next decade will likely be Britain's version of Trump. He's been legitimized by winning a seat and getting himself into Parliament, which is something he's tried to do for decades and has never been successful. And finally, this time he has. So whilst we're celebrating here that there is a new Labour government, an inclusive government with Keir Starmer as a new prime minister, I also am warning of the rise of fascism in the form of Nigel Farage. The media, because he's so charismatic, are likely to platform him, to put him on TV all the time, to give him airtime. And that is very dangerous. And the media don't really care. It's all about ratings and, it's all about revenue. So, they really don't care about the detail because ultimately they can afford to, live their lives no matter who's in government. But in terms of the US, we're at a crossroads. November is going to be essential. And I ask you to look to the UK, see the elation, see how people here, even conservatives, are like, we were done with the Conservative Party. And I'm hoping in the US, conservatives are done with Donald Trump. It's enough with Donald Trump. He is not as popular as he tells you he is. He's won nothing since 2016. He makes a lot of noise. Don't trust him. It's all a show. The heart of America, the soul of America is democracy. There's only one party offering that, and that is the Democrats. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me on the 5 Minute News podcast and YouTube channel on Wednesdays, co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.